You have an opinion about that. Could you a little bit elaborate on Palantir? It's an American software. It's yeah, I know.
Yeah,
just
I'll
briefly.
try to sum it up in 2 minutes because I don't want to use up time in here. So if you look at Palantir CEO, I mean, they came out with a specifically design-oriented software solution about 3 months ago, and the promise was there that it's fully autonomous. So actually, in the demo, it's available online, so you can Google it. You can see that a target is being detected, then automatically the system generates options for the commander, does all the military decision making analysis. He just chooses one option, and then immediately the orders are being sent out to the subunits, and everything is just magically happens. So I believe that sometime in the future, I think that software-based applications will be able to better support decision making like that. Right now, it's a demo, and I caution everyone. War is ultimately a human endeavor. It's a clash of human wills, and if we have a software application like that, we can have superior situational awareness, which is very important, but I don't want anyone to believe, that in and of itself is enough to conquer the enemy, because as we say, in the military, the enemy has a vote, so they are reading the memo as well, and they will see the countermeasures, and they will do their own things as well, and humans together with autonomous systems in the future, I think will be magnificent, but right now that technology is not there. It's a promise of these companies. It's very useful in some ways in helping decision making, but I wouldn't just solely rely on these softwares to do the job of talented military professionals.
We've heard presentations regarding the rules that may apply to unmanned vehicles of various types, to space, and to development of defense industries. My question would be this. It's obvious from what was said that the European Union is on the back foot. It is not as advanced under these technologies as some of our competitors are. Yet the proposals for regulation usually refer to situations or domains where regulation was easy so long as nobody was present in those domains. Space, for example. It was a good romantic thought that space would be for everyone. However, as history has shown us, and that has shown us for the past centuries, whenever an area is capable of being exploited, the romantic notion of unregulation or general access and generic rules that apply to everyone collapses. As soon as there's a natural resource over which nations may compete, sovereignty will be extended over that resource, disconsidering all international treaties, including peace treaties and even ethical general rules. So wouldn't it be an alternative approach, in the opinion of the panel, firstly to somehow reduce European lack of development by especially regulating the export of European dual-use technologies, including towards our partners, the United States, who has great advantages over Europe in technology, so that an equilibrium may be reestablished. The genesis of legal rules is usually a set of equilibrium rules, where parties are somehow equal and they may impose a will on each other partially. Right now, the technological domain seems to be unequal. Yes, this would be my question, that wouldn't it be appropriate for European lawmakers to proceed to enacting rules which somehow diminish the great technological advantage of our competitors, regardless of who they are? Thank you.
First of all, yes, you have right. Like, there is even this very nice article saying that some weapons, some technologies are regulation resistant and some are regulation tolerant, and because there are so many different reasons for that. But your question about whether EU should regulate in a way that will diminish the competitiveness of another technological sector is probably beyond my my knowledge, because it relates, I think, to business law or commercial law or competition law globally, WTO. So I think that from like looking at it with some kind of rationality, military powers were always and will always be first, And in that realm of business, I think it's very hard to compete and input some additional, I don't know, some provisions that would make us equal. I don't know.
Try, yes. Yeah, I was just wondering what to do with if any EU regulations would be effective upon other countries' protective rules, like ITAR and ER. Yes, we probably would, even if we would be keen to make it, I don't think US are now doing anything to relax ITAR, not at this moment. There was Obama time, but not now.
So for the space part of the panel, I'm not sure if you can answer my question, but I really have like sovereignty legal dilemma about the limitation of the airspace and outer space. Just because in outer space, space law applies, like you suggested. In airspace, air law applies. And if you look at technical, I just Googled down here just to help us or me and maybe you. So civil aviation traffic is limited by 18 kilometers. They cannot fly higher. Balloons, our balloons, spy balloons or weather balloons, they can fly up to 50 kilometers. Then up to 120 kilometers is re-entry threshold for space systems. This is where they're starting to enter the airspace. Maybe atmosphere, I'm not so sure. And then 160 kilometers is the lowest practical operating orbit for satellites. So my question is, until which height, altitude applies the air law and when space law starts to apply? Or maybe other question that would be better for generals, like until which altitude is, for example, Hungary in the air, still Hungary, sovereign country, and what happens about that and where you know, space law applies? I know this is my personal dilemma. If you can help me with this a little bit, you have studied these things.
This is the problem. There are roughly 100 different theories how to delimit airspace from outer space, and all is justified. But they are, of course, not equal. Just one example, what is usually used as a delimitation, the Kármán line at 100 kilometers. First of all, Kármán line is not at 100 kilometers. If you do the calculations, it is 90, roughly, because it is dependent on the density of the upper atmosphere. So it is not constant. And the Kármán line is based on aerodynamics, that below the Kármán line, you need the aerodynamic lift to continue flying. Above Kármán line, you are on a Keplerian orbit, you do not need lift. But above Kármán line, there are still aerodynamic effects. You can brake a spacecraft with aerodynamic effects, you can stabilize, practically you can steer a spacecraft with aerodynamic effects. So is there an atmosphere above the Kármán line? Yes, sure it is. Again, another example from the biological point of view. Life, as we know it, cannot exist above roughly 20 kilometers without any protection system. Because the water in our body would boil away because of the lack of air pressure. So we can say that this can be a limit of atmosphere and outer space, but at the same time, with protective systems, we can still exist above it. So it's just a technological question. And there are, again, dozens, 100 examples of different delimitations. What you mentioned, 120 kilometers re-entry. That's a very good example because if you that's a NASA technical rule. Entry interface is at 400,000 feet, which is roughly 120 kilometers. But when you are leaving the Earth towards the space, the limit is 80 kilometers. So going upwards, you are in space when you leave 80 kilometers from the US perspective. But when you are coming back, the limit is 120. So what? Actually, you mentioned Hungary. This is very important because, again, if we go to sovereignty without capabilities, without enforcing that sovereignty is worthless. And different countries have different capabilities. So, for example, Hungary is buying an air defense system that is capable of shooting down aircraft up at 20-some kilometers. I don't know. I am not an air defense officer now. The US has an air defense system, anti-ballistic missile system, that is capable of shooting down satellites at 200 kilometers. But it is incapable of shooting down hypersonic aircraft flying at 80 kilometers because it does not have the maneuverability. So what? Where can they enforce their rules? This is why we do not have a universal definition where airspace ends and outer space starts based on this spatial approach, because we don't know the physical limit. Now there is the functionalist approach. Space is where space flight is being done, and space flight is what? We do not have a definition for what space flight is. This is why the law is ambiguous, and this is why we are lacking in my opinion, a stable footing for space operations. That question you asked is right now impossible to answer. But I will pass it now to Katarzyna.
Yeah, I will maybe satisfy your legal curiosity. It's really the battle between space lawyers, between the spatialists and functionalists. The one section wants to set the limit, the other not. And I'm in the fraction that on the level of national law sees the need to define it for the purposes of administration of the, of the security, transparency of law. So if I have a space operator, he needs to know if he needs a license. That's very important for the suborbital flights. Do they need license or not? For what? For a flight or for a space activity? So from the point of view of certainty of law, at least on national level, we need it. And some countries, those who recently adopted national space laws, tend to regulate this border, like Australia, Denmark, so the newer ones. Also because of the enhanced capabilities as regards suborbital flights. But of course the capability also dictated the sovereignty, and the very famous example is so-called Bogota declarations, the declaration of '76, that part of the countries located in the South America, they decided that they have sovereignty until the orbit. And they declared that all the countries which launched the satellite need to have a license or pay them some money because they have unlimited sovereignty. That, of course, now it's cited as a joke. But yeah, that was a kind of idea.
I have a question to the space law panel, or the space lawyers, or space experts. I've read a lot of articles which are describing the Russian and Ukraine aggression as the first commercial space war, because they are using commercial satellites for internet, and Elon Musk is also supporting Ukraine with a lot of satellite images or GPS data, and I think it could potentially be used as evidence for criminal procedures as against humanity or humanitarian attacks. So my question is, in your opinion, could an attack against a commercial satellite potentially be an attack against a third nation?
We do not have precedents to rely on, and we need to reach back to international humanitarian law, which is not my expertise, but the lawyers will correct me if I'm saying wrong. Generally, civilian infrastructure is protected from military attacks, but if that civilian infrastructure is used for military purposes, and an attack on that civilian infrastructure has direct military advantages to the party that attacks it, it is possible. And I mean direct. So, for example, take a bridge. If a tank is rolling over a bridge, you can drop the bridge because an enemy tank, because it has direct military advantages. Am I saying it? Yeah. But just to generally weaken the economy of your enemy, just taking out civilian infrastructure, because by taking out that civilian infrastructure, the enemy state will be weaker, that is not allowed. So now take Starlink. Starlink is used in Ukraine. That's roughly 5,000 satellites orbiting the Earth. Detonating an electromagnetic weapon that disables 3,000 of these Starlink satellites, collapsing the Starlink infrastructure, and taking out the whole global service, in my opinion, that would be a little bit too much. But taking a truck to the Starlink ground station in Poland, detonating, say, 3 tons of TNT, and wiping out the entire ground station, that can be within limits, because it takes out the service over Ukraine and in Poland and Hungary and so on. So it has collateral effects, but primarily it takes out the service over Ukraine. And if someone is thinking about Article 5 and NATO and whatever, in 2015, we know the names of the GRU agents who took out artillery munition depots in the Czech Republic. And we do not have Third World War. We know they were military officers of the Russian armed forces, and they committed a physical attack in a NATO country. And so what? 20 diplomats were expelled. Who cares? So, in my opinion, in such a conflict, the space infrastructure will most likely be targeted, most likely be not targeted with kinetic weapons, but with electromagnetic weapons and cyber effects. And the legality will be decided by the winners.
I think your question will be amazing for next panel, because it relates to cyber. And I would invite you to look at national positions on applicability of international law to cyberspace. At least in Poland, there were some specific provisions saying that critical infrastructure being attacked can be also seen as attack on a state, because that was your question, as an aggression. Thank you.
I have to Ms. Sombori and to you a question. I think, but I don't know, UN aggression definition 3314. Is it relevant for your topic? And secondly, I don't know the real English word in Deutsch, Hager Landkriegsordnung, the Hague Rules for Land War from 1899, I think. Is it relevant? Because there are some passages where they, in my opinion, define what is war, what is allowed, what is not allowed. For example, destroy or take away from goods. And if you destroy, for example, the infrastructure by cyber, I think it could be, but only a question. It could be relevant. Second, a very short advice. We have STANAG, we have the NATO cooperative for standardization. In NATO, I think for defense it is not totally important, not important. Second, in Germany we have the DIN too, not only VDI. Deutsches Institut für Normung.
First of all, the definition of aggression and the document that you mentioned, that is the General Assembly resolution, which is a binding document. So it's of course, it provides help for interpretation, but it still does not resolve the problem. So I also referred to that in my paper. So it helps, but it does not give clear answers as to the hybrid attacks, which are basically very, they vary in nature. And your second comment about the Hague regulations. So as I mentioned during my presentation, really the international humanitarian law is a very vast body of international law. I need to make a deeper research because the truth is I haven't done research so much on the connection between the Hague regulations and the hybrid war. That might be something interesting. So thank you for that advice.
I think that it's obvious that it's DIN and it's TANAC, and also, as I've said, information during the presentation also is Typepedia, which is, how to say, refer to the TANAC and the regulations which are already there. So I think that this we are speaking about the same, and as you have used another, how to say, entities which are illustrating that this topic and this area is complex, and I will finish like that.
So I take the advantage of the time that, and when Kaja is not asking the questions. So I have the question to Grzegorz. Thank you very much, Katarzyna, and thank you very much, Tomasz. Very comprehensive and very clear presentation, so that's why I don't have the questions to you, but my questions goes to Grzegorz. So I promised to Grzegorz not ask the questions, but it was only the promise. So I ask about the critical infrastructure and the security of the critical infrastructure, because I'm the expert on the terrorists and concerned mainly, of course, with the critical infrastructure. And I have the questions concerned with the couple days ago, our Prime Minister, Polish Prime Minister, announced publicly that he intends to put Polish, Ukrainian and Polish-Belarusian border on the list of the critical infrastructure list. So you think that's the good idea? Because we know that the threats from the east are increasing. I mean, the illegal migrations. It concerns, of course, not only the Ukrainian, but also Belarusian. And we, as the services, also have the informal information that the Russians are preparing also the attacks, terrorist attacks, in some points in the Poland. So the west border of the Poland is also the one of the longest borders of the European Union. So the threat is not only on the territory of Poland, but the other countries belonging to the European Union.
This border is crucial, and in my opinion, the proposal to introduce this type of changes is necessary, because this would, for example, contribute to increase the security of border zones, and thus, to some extent, could improve security. But I know that it's only project. But I have some information about this question, information connected with number of not attacks, but number of espionage. Connected with espionage in our border, because in recent years we have observed increase in the activity of Russian and Belarusian spies who are trying to identify to critical infrastructure facilities, including railway lines. For example, 6, maybe 10 months ago, the special services caught a man, the Russian man, a sportsman in south of Poland, who tried to recognize a railways line which transport military aid to the Ukrainian. And this project, in my opinion, is very good, yes?
I would like to ask a very complex question to involve all of your expertise, because we will start with cyber, of critical infrastructure, and a little hybrid. So during the early hours of the Russian attack 2 years ago on Ukraine, there was a cyber operation to take out a satellite communication system called KSAT. It disabled like 30,000 satellite communication terminals, most of which was in Ukraine, but spillover effect, 6,000 satellite communication terminals in Germany operating electrical power systems. Now, the important part is that this was a very easy attack because it used three well-known vulnerabilities of these systems for which protection or patches were available for months or even more than a year. But the operator neglected. So the first question is, if such a cyber attack is possible because of the negligence of the victim, how would it influence the legal decision-making, a court procedure, if there is such a court where the attacker could be brought after the incident? This is the first part. The second part, how can we prevent, with standards, legislation, counter hybrid operation procedures or whatever, how can we prevent such negligence in our critical infrastructure?
The negligence on the part of the operator doesn't affect the criminal liability of the attacker. So it's like a case when I go around with my open bag and there's a wallet in, so it's easier to steal. But of course, this means that the negligent operator could be also criminally liable if you have a criminal offense out of negligence for enabling the attacker that this critical infrastructure attack. Of course, it's up to the state how it defines this attack. It could also be a terrorist attack if it has some terrorist intent behind it. So this would be the question, and how to prevent it. The easiest way, as a criminal lawyer, I would always say implement negligent criminal behavior for the operators, so that they will know that if they will not take care of their networks, they can also be criminally liable for potential attacks that cause serious damage. So this could be an option from the criminal law aspect.
We don't have the 100% to provide the security measures. I mean, so there are some leaks and holes. There, the crime is able.
It means that he did not do enough, as it would be demanded from an expert on that.
Yes.
It doesn't mean you have to be 100% safe, but at least how the normal or professional expert in his field should have acted.
We have the experience. What about the Poland? My university, War Studies Academy, was attacked by the Russian hackers the last year, and until this time we can't rise up. So that was the so hard attack. So we have the problems with the internet, the connections with the systems. So all the time we see the attempts of the attacks on the Polish infrastructure. So I don't know how it's in your countries, but we experience it in our country from the Russian side.
Universities, for example, might also fall under the important entities. I think it's called in that way. And this directive tries to impose on everyone to assess their risks and to do whatever is necessary to prevent any damages that might happen. And if they don't do that and some incident occurs, obviously they will be liable for what happened. More or less we have solutions. What we need is people applying these solutions. And for example, finance sector is at least in Croatia, is very advanced with that respect. And it's very well established. But they started in 2006 or so. So it takes time. And it will take time, obviously, if Russia is poking around Poland, then it will be a motive for you to shorten that time frame. But nevertheless, the activities are there. Now, the slowest element in the whole story is always humans.
In general, actually, all of your presentations that contain some degree of concern with regard to not having defined some terms. I wonder about what the utility of a definition would be if it would result in becoming too narrow, thus obsolete in a couple of years, or too wide, and then including things that shouldn't be included, and giving justification for retortion that would otherwise be a bit excessive. So in this mind frame of being too narrow or too broad, where do you think that what is your personal take on where the direction of defining terms should be?
So from the legal aspect, the definition is clear when it is in a legal document. Until we have a legal document, it's all speculation and theories, and we have 100 definitions. So we don't have that legal document yet. And regarding too narrow and too broad, it's hard to say. Maybe the way that is structured now in these old conventions, when you demand military armed operations, it's too narrow for cyber attack. But if you just say any kind of computer attack from another state, it can also be too broad. So it's hard to say right now. But the one who will be legally examining the field, I think they can bring up some very good definitions.
What we seek is good working operational definitions, and as such, they allow us to know what we are talking about. And to clear the fog, actually, that's in the newspapers and media and who knows where not. And in that way, it allows us to advance the area. So regarding too narrow or too broad, the answer is the same. It depends. They have to be useful from this standpoint. If they are narrow, they are broad, essentially doesn't matter.
Do you think there are foreseeable legal norms that would, or legal instruments, not necessarily norms, that would offer a definition of hybrid warfare in terms of thresholds, where hybrid warfare would elicit either a hybrid response or even a conventional response, especially in the field of non-kinetic weapons or in the field of non-kinetic actions, so not necessarily in the classic framework?
There is a debate on that, of course, among the legals. There are pros and cons, but from the one hand, probably from the practical point of view, it would not be the most wise thing to introduce thresholds just for introducing thresholds, because it also offers, when there isn't a threshold, there is an element of surprise, let's say. So from the point of view of an aggressor, of a hybrid aggressor, he cannot be sure where to put the threshold, or what will trigger the reaction of the targeted state, for example. And when there would be a threshold, probably it would be easier for a hybrid aggressor to adopt such a technique, which would surely be under that threshold. Until now, it is not so obvious. So it's still about checking each other, for example. I'm not even sure if it's possible for the international community to agree on thresholds. I don't know. I don't think so.
I think also a good question is why we would need a threshold to define whether that was a use of force and therefore aggression if we have no legal consequences for aggression of Russia on Ukraine, and consequently, like this, well, we have some, but they are not as they're supposed to be. Like there should be deterrence mechanism, right? And if such an open aggression is still happening, then the below or over the threshold activities, I think from a realistic point of view, they are, well, even more accepted.
First of all, I think that the reluctance to react is also a sign that maybe the international community is looking to avoid escalation of conflict. That is also an important factor. And as for the consequences, well, let's leave the let's put aside. You mentioned the Russian aggression, but let's think about for example, 2021 migrant crisis on the Polish, Belarusian, Lithuanian, Belarusian, and Latvian, Belarusian border, which was clearly labeled as a hybrid attack that is aimed to destabilize Europe, and by the EU officials, not only. I wouldn't say that there weren't consequences, because there were many sanctions after that imposed on Belarus. So there was also a mechanism of punishment and deterrence. And the other question, if it was effective or not.
I will tell you the truth according to the Polish point of view. I don't know if you know the Polish prosecutor office, 3 days after the Russian aggression, launched a huge investigation with international partners, with Litva, Latvia, Estonia, and the Polish prosecutor's office, Polish prosecutors led very huge investigation and collected a lot of evidences.